Hello and welcome to Nation Watch for today, May 11th, 2025. Today is a very important day in the lives of our mothers. And I'd like to, on behalf of the leader, executive, members of the People's National Congress Reform, and on my own behalf, extend warm wishes to all mothers and all those who have played the role of mothers on this very, very important day, to those who have mothered villages of children and who have set examples and who have nurtured our children. We thank you and we wish you well in this day, particularly to those who have cared for our children, our nurses, our doctors, our teachers who have helped to mold the minds of our children, and by extension, the nation. Happy Mother's Day to the men as well who have mothered children. Happy Mother's Day. Yesterday, we got the sad news that a former member of the People's National Congress Reform, Ms. Amna Ali, had died. Amna Ali was a member of the PNCR for more than 50 years and served in various capacities, including chair of the Young Socialist Movement, as it was then known, and General Secretary of the People's National Congress Reform. She also served as a Minister of Government, Chief Whip, both in opposition and in government. The party has paid tribute by way of a statement to Ms. Ali, who died yesterday. To her family, her relatives, her friends, and to party comrades, we here at Nation Watch extend sincere condolences. Not so long ago, on May 8th, May 8th marked the birth anniversary of Guyana's second Prime Minister, Dr. Ptolemy Alexander Reid. Dr. Reid served as Prime Minister of this country and was known as one of our country's grassroots leaders. His birth anniversary was on May 8th. Many people will remember Dr. Ptolemy Reid. Dr. Reid was a gentleman who adopted two indigenous young ladies as his own daughters and raised them. Dr. Ptolemy Reid was a man of the people, particularly in the agricultural sector. He was a veterinarian by profession. And the party is, of course, poor for the loss of such an esteemed gentleman. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring you up to scratch with what has been happening in the Adriana Young case. The latest report is available in today's Kaichur News that is headlined, the story is headlined, Foreign Pathologists Seek Review of Adriana's Postmortem Examination Records and Possible Examination of the Body. The story goes on to say that Dr. Dexter Todd, who is the family's lead attorney at this time, was interviewed, and he confirmed that the family had not ruled out the possibility of international transportation of Adriana's body for an examination by independent pathologists. There's also, it's also reported that there will be a review of the video footage of the actual postmortem examination. And of course, you know that Dr. Todd has, as well as the People's National Congress Reform through its leader, Aubrey Norton, rejected government's nominated investigator from Canada, a retired law enforcement officer, who was handpicked by the People's Progressive Party. And the search is still on, as I understand it, for an independent investigation. For its part, the PNCR, through its leader, Aubrey Compton Norton, has called for, I believe it's a commission of inquiry into the death of Adriana Young, so that the truth could be revealed. You will remember that this gentleman, Kerrick, was handpicked by the People's Progressive Party, particularly or specifically by Barrett Jagdeo, to come and oversee the Guyana Police Force. Well, we all know the story about Kerrick having been a disgraced former police commissioner from another country. So the Adriana Young case is still receiving attention both locally and internationally. The objective is clearly to ensure that the family gets closure and that the truth is unearthed regarding what transpired in that particular case on that fateful day. New images have emerged on social media with the young lady in the pool and the proprietor of the hotel standing by, shirtless, in shorts, with a towel on his shoulder, watching on at the proceedings in the pool. Lots of speculation surrounding the surfacing of that image. But this whole question of handpicking, you will recall that when the leader of the opposition opposed and made it quite clear that he opposed the appointment of Clifton Hicken as Commissioner of Police and stated his reasons for so doing, Gail Teixeira, on behalf of the President, wrote to Mr. Norton pointing out all those glorious reasons and all those major accomplishments and accolades that the PPP bestowed upon Clifton Hicken, and ensuring that he was in fact confirmed in the appointment as Commissioner of Police. Well, we have seen the true colors of Hicken and the Guyana Police Force led by him. We have seen what's happened in Linden. The police force, as the majority of people in the country have been saying, cannot be trusted. We had statements emanating from the police regarding the shooting incident in Linden, that the police, in fact, left the station properly attired in force-issued uniform and marked vehicles and so on. And we saw the video where the policeman exited an unmarked black minibus with a weapon in his hand, went out there and came back dragging the body of a young man who was shot, who he had shot. And we also know that in the demonstrations, a young man was going home and he too was shot dead in the process by the police. We are not hearing much about that. We have seen the misleading statements. In the case of Adriana Young, we have seen the misleading statement about her leaving the premises in a vehicle, which was properly described in the statement. The registration number was provided, the color, make, and model was also made available by the police in a statement, which itself later on retracted, saying it was misleading, inaccurate. Well, the people were told, the relatives were told, that there was a video. We would like to see the video that the police had in their possession at that time when they said the young lady left the premises. More confusion again. We saw a private citizen, popular private citizen, returning home to Guyana and being greeted by a large body of reporters. It's quite interesting that when the permanent secretary from the Ministry of Home Affairs came back to Guyana with a cancelled visa, having been detained, having been interrogated, having had her phone confiscated and deep searched, and later on returned, weeks later returned, there was no one at the airport to greet her to find out what went wrong. Senior police officer from the Criminal Investigations Department, detained, interviewed, detained again and interviewed again, sent back to Guyana. No media personnel was there to greet him to find out what went wrong. Prominent businessman and member of the Ethnic Relations Commission, um, Roshan Khan, was interviewed in the United States. No media personnel was there to greet him at the airport to find out what went wrong. But all of a sudden, the media is moved to go and reach Miss Primus as she arrived. No, she's now more celebrated than she was before then. I'm sure she's more marketable in her field of endeavor than she was before then. I think while the media may have done her some promotional good, it doesn't change the fact that it's rather embarrassing that the media in this country will go after a situation like that. And many other matters in this country require attention, but is not afforded the same. The territorial controversy between Guyana and Venezuela and the most recent developments, crucial to the life of every single citizen of this country. Nobody's pursuing it. Nobody is pursuing it. The police force and its high-handedness, its ability to find persons that allegedly committed acts of terrorism and acts of inciting violence, finding them wherever they are, but was unable to find an innocent little girl who was separated from her family and later found dead in a pool where nothing was hours before. We have become a nation in need of salvation. We are in a bad place. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to look at some developments in the hinterland here. Well, I'm not sure we can call it development, but some things that have happened in the hinterland, I'd like to spend a little bit of time showing you. We are approaching the rainy season, and in the south of Guyana, in the Rupununi region, in Region 9, there are always challenges with the weather. It's either too dry or it's flooded. In this case, we're approaching the rainy season and floods are imminent. And here's the condition of a newly built bridge. Here's the condition of a newly built bridge, costing tens of millions of dollars. And that is what it looks like at the moment. Pretty soon, this structure will collapse. And when it does, it'll have to be reconstructed at maybe twice the cost. Obviously, there will have to be demolition activity. That will cost money. And then increased cost of construction will see us going way over our heads in terms of expenditure. This is a necessary piece of infrastructure. I do not know why the decking on this bridge is still made of wooden planks, and I cannot understand why a concrete beam on a newly built bridge could be this badly damaged on the verge of collapse. Recognizing, of course, that the traffic to the south is now increased, and that the load, the freight hauling to the region is increasing, and from the region as well is increasing. And if you look at the size of the trucks that traverse the roadway, you will understand the need for far better infrastructure in the region. As you can see in this particular image, a bridge collapsed, and there are two trucks there. Drivers attempted to find a detour, an alternative route to get across that creek, and they both ended up, as you can see them, in the image. We also have a situation where another bridge, this one is in the deep south, um, collapsed, and the residents are desperately trying to put it back together so that they can get where they have to go. This is a bridge en route to Parabara, and I want this bridge, please, if we can get it full screen so persons can see what is really happening here. Citizens have got to leave what they're doing and to extend their travel time to attend to this bridge. It collapsed, and they are trying to use the material from it to create an alternative pathway so that their vehicles can traverse from one side of this creek to the other. You will see that's where the bridge was. It has collapsed, and the materials are being used at a convenient point to try to create an alternative temporary crossing. And you know what is interesting here, ladies and gentlemen? The regional executive officer of Region 9 is more often in Marudi Mountains, in the mines of the Marudi Mountains, than he is in his office, than he is in the fields looking after the interest of the people. The man is a miner. The man has personal interest in Marudi mines and is neglecting his responsibility as it relates to the safety, happiness, and well-being of the people of the region. And this is what persons have got to go through. And I'm going to share with you communication that I received regarding this bridge.
Yeah, bro, this the bridge what broke. You not see no development on the bridge from PP. It's still we punch already. It take like all day. For we stick up, we winch out, we try to build it to pass. This the bridge is from Parabar going to Crowder. Because when you're coming from Crowder with the big bush mud, this bridge is the second bridge when you're coming from Bushmont from Crowder. When you're coming from Crowder, this is the second bridge that we punishing. So I just showing you this bridge. Don't know what the government doing. And when you get next one coming this side, it's the same thing too. So just showing you this photo because right now we punishing. We had children hungry. Children want to drink water. We spend like 5 hours to fix this bridge. You could see how we working hard down there.
Yep, children are suffering. Children are needing food, in need of water. There's none because they're stuck for 5 hours fixing a bridge to get from one place to another and eventually to their homes. This is the kind of thing that people do not pay attention to. And while this is so, a certain senior government official in the region who has responsibility for some of this is more focused on other activities which we learned resulted in him being arrested in Brazil, allegedly having in his possession mineral that the source of which, the ownership of which, the destination of which he was not in a position to confirm. We understand from the reports received that this person was eventually released because of the high office that he holds locally and because of the good relations that we share with our neighbors to the south. Ladies and gentlemen, we in this country, particularly the indigenous peoples and hinterland residents of this country, have very little access to the media to speak our story, to tell our story to the rest of the nation and the world. And so a lot of what happens goes unreported. For example, there are all sorts of rumors going around that the REO of Region 9 was supposed to have been transferred, but because he is attending to the personal interests of someone more senior to him in central government, he could not have been removed because there's no one to look after the personal interest of that executive, of that person who's a member of the executive. This is absolute lawlessness. Absolute lawlessness. And then we have Pauline Sukai going to the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and carrying a team representing a Guyana that many of us do not know, representing conditions of life for indigenous peoples that indigenous peoples cannot recognize. But before we get to Pauline Sukai and her elastic truth, I want to spare a word for the National Tushaus Council. You see, the National Tushaus Council is supposed to be the National Assembly of indigenous leaders of this country. They're supposed to be an autonomous body. They're supposed to be able to elect from among their number their executive, formulate their own policies, and they have a statutory responsibility to advise the minister on policy and on law. That's in the statutes. But the National Tushaus Council has become a poodle of the People's Progressive Party. And it's regrettable. It's regrettable. We saw a Tushau from Kapui coming out on social media on a video alleging that she was disrespected by a businessman who is believed to have some political ambitions. A businessman with whom the People's Progressive Party is clearly uncomfortable. Clearly uncomfortable. I think the PPP's problem is not that this man is rich or that he appears to be popular, but because he's Indian. The PPP has consumed every East Indian leader in this country who has challenged it. And we can go to names because the ERC is watching and they're likely to suggest that I'm being racist. I'm being factual. Let's call a few names. Asghar Ali joined this government as Minister of Finance in 1992. Jagdeo was put there as Finance Commissar to watch Asghar Ali and to, from behind the scenes, politically control him. Asghar Ali became fed up, decided to form his own political party and challenge the People's Progressive Party. Where's Asghar Ali now? Gone with the wind. Let's go before Asghar Ali to Richard Field and Singh, who succeeded Manzoor Nadir, in fact, who preceded Manzoor Nadir, I believe, forgive me if I get that wrong, as leader of the United Force. He, Field and Singh, was pressured by the People's Progressive Party to the extent that he left this country and his political party behind. Manzoor Nadir took over the United Force, and following his assumption of leadership of the United Force, secured a seat on the opposition benches, migrated to the People's Progressive Party, taking his seat with him, becoming a minister of government, resulting in legislative change to make sure that that didn't happen again. Labor leader, what's his name? I don't remember these chaps really. They're difficult to remember. But he led a union. I'll remember his name in a minute. And he formed the Democratic Labor Movement. Democratic Labor Movement. Eventually, he was consumed by the People's Progressive Party and became Minister of Labor. Somebody help me in the comments with his name, please. I can see his face in my mind, but I don't remember his name. You see, when people are traitors, it's not easy to remember. But this gentleman sold out the entire labor movement of which he was a part and became the Minister of Labor and pressured the unions and the working people of this country. And then there was the man with the umbrella party, not the man holding the umbrella over the rich man, not him, not that one, not that traitor, the other one. No, it's not Joseph Hamilton, Mr. Augustus. This is a middle to upper class East Indian gentleman who was a labor leader. Somebody will remember his name. Mr. Gopal. Mr. Gopal, that's the man. Nanda Kishore Gopal, that's the gentleman. Now, this gentleman formed a party, this other gentleman, I believe it was a URP, I think it was a United Republican Party. Then he was consumed by the People's Progressive Party and became Minister of Health. Let's see how our followers are alert. They remember his name. I have a difficulty as well. I think CN Shamu referred to him as a lab technician. He is reportedly the person who signed on behalf of this government, the People's Progressive Party government, for a laptop that is sold only to governments that has the capacity for triangulating cellular calls. In the days of Roger Khan, he was reportedly among the last persons leaving the Ministry of Health on Brickdam on the night when the ministry was burnt to the ground. So you see, and of course we could go way back past then, and we could talk about Balram Singh Rai, who was more popular than Chedi Jagan in the People's Progressive Party, who was ostracized, who was pressurized, and who ran from this country and lived in the UK until the day he died, never speaking a word about his reason for leaving. The People's Progressive Party has always been uncomfortable with the presence of Indian leaders in this country that oppose the People's Progressive Party. And we could talk about my neighbor too. My neighbor started a political party named ROAR that was supposed to take the entire sugar belt as its support group. And it was going to erode the support of the People's Progressive Party. ROAR roared its way to one seat in Parliament in its alliance with the Guyana Action Party. there was an alliance named Gap Roar that yielded, that earned one seat in the National Assembly of the Parliament that my friend, now deceased Everett Franklin, occupied. Today, my neighbor is writing as though the PPP just descended from heaven to save this country, consumed by the People's Progressive Party. And this fear that the People's Progressive Party has about emerging Indian popular political possibilities has resulted in protests against this Indian businessman going into villages on the East Coast and other places, resulting in a female East Indian assaulting an African Guyanese man, and the police arresting the man who was assaulted initially. Video footage was released. They saw the truth, they let the man go, but they never held on to the person who assaulted him. Guess why? Shefard is a big thing in the PPP. So this gentleman went to Kapui, his latest visit according to what we're seeing. And this Tushau said she was disrespected. And all of a sudden, the indigenous leader from Kapui remembers that there's something named the Amerindian Act, and remembers, or has been reminded, or was reminded, that there's a provision that says you need to write seeking permission to enter the village. Big story. But then the other side of the truth came out. The man was invited to the village. There was a chat group established, a WhatsApp chat group established, of which councillors were members and participants. And they invited the man. And the Tushau drinking bush for PPP fever. Amna Ali get fever, and the Tushau in Kapui drinking bush. And then the other story came out that because it is in fact a tourist destination, that there was a collective decision of the village council some time ago that there will be access allowed to the tourist site, not requiring the communication in writing and the approval in writing. Now, no village rule can overrule the law. That's a fact. But Lake Mainstay is also a tourist destination. I've been to Lake Mainstay. I've spent 2 weeks at Lake Mainstay. We've never had to ask for permission to enter the resort. No, sir, we didn't. Because the village council of Mainstay, Wayaka, a long time ago entered into an agreement with the operators of the tourist resort. Of course, if you want to enter the village proper, you have to do the right thing and get the permission, get the written approval. According to what we read in Kapui, this gentleman and his delegation, was a very small delegation according to what I read, did not go into the village proper, but were in the area designated for tourist activity. But the PPP is desperate. I am almost certain that if a political leader of another ethnicity from another party, no matter the PNC and the APNU at this stage, we big, we know the rules, we comply. We've always done. Had done what this gentleman did, there would have been no cry, no outrage. None at all. But then the NTC comes out with a statement. The National Tushau Council came out with a statement, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see if we can find the statement. Let me see if I could find this statement. I was shocked out of my boots when I read this statement from the National Two Shows Council. A long, long statement. The National Two Shows Council, NTC, the highest representative body of all duly elected indigenous leaders of Guyana, issues this advisory to all political parties, organizations, civil society groups, and individuals who seek to visit or engage with Amerindian villages and communities across the country. Big fancy preamble. Big fancy preamble. The NTC emphasizes that entry and access to Amerindian lands must be done in accordance with the provision of the Amerindian Act of 2006. This legislation clearly outlines the procedure to be followed, which includes obtaining permission from the respective village council prior to any visit, activity, or engagement within the community. These procedures are not optional. They're a matter of law and exist to protect the autonomy, culture, and governance structures of Guyana's forest people. Where was the NTC when Pauline Sukai, Minister of Amerindian Affairs, stepped outside of her remit and made possible, facilitated, witnessed the signing of an agreement to mine in Aranaputa? Where was the NTC? Pauline Sukai standing there with the chair of the Neighborhood Democratic Council of Upper Buruburu, Aranaputa, and a businessman from Brazil to mine in the lands of within the boundaries of the NDC in the North Rupununi. What role did she have to play there? The report that they put up here was that this signing followed wide consultation. Wide consultation. Where was the NTC? It took the North Rupununi District Development Board to stand up to the government of Guyana and to say to them that we were not consulted. Every one of the two shows who were present there that day to speak with Vikram Bharat and to tell him that they were not consulted, every one of them is a member of the National Two Shows Council. Where was the executive that drafted this fancy statement? Well, they don't draft. This just issue. We know who in the ministry drafts these things. They just issue. But how could you assume high moral ground on a petty matter such as this when a grave injustice escaped your attention? How do you justify that? And this lady didn't only witness and facilitate this thing, she gave the NDC an excavator. How timely, how coincidental. What was our interest? The NDC of Aranaputa is not an Amerindian community. It is a neighborhood democratic council area. What was she doing there? How did she become involved? Why did she give a brand new excavator valued more than $14 million to Aranaputa? That is a matter for the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development. What does Pauline have to do with that? And the NTC tells this nation about law and compliance with regulations for visiting a village as a big issue. And all of the villages of the North Rupununi came out against this Pauline Sukai story. And they shut it down. Pauline Sukai has political responsibility in the PPP for Region 8. Why did she not take the minor to Region 8? You remember when she became minister in this dispensation, the first thing she did? Marbel Thomas, an honorable woman, was to show of her village, Campbelltown in Region 8. And there was a gold rush in that area. And Marbel Thomas shut down the mining so that she can organize the people, so that safety, welfare, and well-being of the people of the village took precedence over everything else, and that the mining will proceed in a structured manner. You know what Pauline did? She removed Marbel Thomas as Tushaw for doing her job. Tushaw Thomas was doing her job in the best interest of the people of her village. Pauline Sukai removed her unlawfully, in effect barring her from the next election. But Pauline Sukai is not happy with that. She continues to overstep her areas of responsibility. Pauline Sukai went into Region 8, into the town of Madhya, sent a letter to the municipality of Madhya. I'm hoping I can find the letter. I do have it. Yes, let's see here. Pauline Sukai went to Madhya and she sent this letter, which I'll ask my operator to share with you shortly. In the meantime, I shall read it. Here's what she said. This letter is dated. In fact, this letter doesn't have a date. But I'll give you an idea later on of when it was sent. This is an undated letter. It's on the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, Office of the Permanent Secretary letterhead. It says construction of a modern sports ground in Madhya, Region 8. And Teacher Porcy not gonna beat me here because they let it up on your screen. The Ministry of Amerindian Affairs is pleased to collaborate with the Madhya Township to create a modern sports ground within the township to be used by youths in the region. This project will enhance sports development in Region 8, enabling local youths to develop the necessary skills to participate in sports at the national level. As such, we are kindly requesting that you identify suitable unencumbered lands within the township to be utilized to construct a modern sports ground. The Ministry of Amerindian Affairs will facilitate and fund the execution of this project. Looking forward to your usual cooperation. Signed, Ryan Tulsiram, Permanent Secretary, Acting Ministry of Amerindian Affairs. This is the same one who put his hand in my chest and pushed me out of the last NTC conference. The same one. That's the nonsense he writing on behalf of Minister Pauline Sukai to the municipality. I would like Tulsiram and Pauline Sukai to show us the budgetary allocation for this in the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs budget. How could the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs budget for a project in a municipality? How? Under which law? Under which Minister of Finance? And you want unencumbered land to do what? There are lands outside of the municipality. There are lands inside indigenous villages. There are state lands outside both Amerindian villages and the municipality. And how you, Pauline, and your permanent secretary became involved? How? What happened to the Ministry of Local Government? The minister over there ain't got work to do? Or is sense she got sense more than you? She grew up in the PNC Congress Place compound, you know. So she's supposed to got better sense than the rest of you. This is the nonsense that the Ministry of Armed Affairs is indulged in, and the NTC is silent, but jumps out like a roaring lion on the question of entry and visitation to villages. This same NTC that claimed it had the authority to sign on to a resolution that endorsed government's low carbon development strategy in violation of the free, prior, and informed consent provision of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Absolutely no consultation between government and indigenous villages. Absolutely no consultation between those who signed the resolution at the NTC Congress and the villages that they were elected to lead. But they signed. And now they assume the right to speak on the subject of consultation and respect for law. All this nonsense is only happening because of the political hand of the People's Progressive Party in indigenous villages and the NTC, you know. Do you know that they've brought forward the National Tushaus Conference to the 21st of May? That has never happened. But this is an anticipation of an election, so they're going to bring the people out and they will take all the resources they can take out of the Natural Resource Fund and pelt them down with gifts. Heap them with gifts. And seek to enlist them as advocates for their re-election. They have no respect for people. They believe that every indigenous person can be bought. And when you speak out, you're enemy number one. They have started this nonsense about regional Tushaus conference. I would like Pauline Sukai, her permanent secretary, who put his hand in my chest and pushed me out of the NTC conference. God knows if the setting was different, the result would have been different. And the chairman and executive members of the National Tushaus Council to show me one single provision in law that enables the constitution of something named Regional Tushaus Conference. One, just one. But you know what it is? It is fear. There is only one legally recognized district council in this country. That's the South Rupununi District Council. The law is there. It says that district councils can come into being, and the modality has to do with an order signed by the minister and gazetted. Sidney Alicock, former Vice President and Senior Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, mandated his legal assistant, Mr. David James, attorney at law, to consult with the leaders and residents of the South Rupununi pursuant to their application for recognition as a district council. The South Rupununi villages were represented by their elected leaders and an international attorney of indigenous extraction from New Zealand, Mr. McKay. There were negotiations, there were engagements, there were consultations that lasted for months, after which the issues were settled and the ministerial order was signed and gazetted, and the first and now only district council, the South Rupununi District Council, came into being. The Moruca District Council were next in line for consideration, along with the Upper Mazruni District Council and so on. People were organizing themselves to seek and secure legal recognition as district councils. The People's Progressive Party shut that down. No need for districts. We can set up regional bodies outside of the law. You know why? Because they will put their political machinery at the level of the region to manipulate, control, and direct the paths, thoughts, and actions of the indigenous leaders. That's why. But when you give autonomy to people and they think for themselves, they act for themselves, they plan, they make policies and implement them by themselves, the PPP can't handle that. That's why even though the North Rupununi District Development Board exists and has membership that includes all of the villages of the North Rupununi, and even though the South Rupununi District Council exists and speaks for 42 indigenous communities and villages in that area, 42, their membership is 21. But one of those 21 has affiliates numbering 21. So they speak for all of these villages in the Rupununi. But guess what? The PPP will not engage them on those terms. They will not meet with the South Rupununi District Council. They will not meet with the NRDDB. They will make a political arrangement, something called Regional Two-Shows Council that doesn't exist anywhere in law. The disrespect is unbearable. The NTC talks about consultation. They went till to the UNPFI and talked about involvement and consultative this and that. Has the government spoken to any indigenous leader or village in this country in the Essequibo regarding the threats from Venezuela? No. Does the NTC care? They were told not to. The fear is at two levels in the villages on the frontier with Venezuela. The first fear is invasion, that there will be the first people that invading forces from Venezuela, God forbid if it ever happens, will have to face. They're fearful of that, but nobody's going to them to speak with them. Nobody from the government is engaging them to give them assurance. Imbotero got 3 police. You just got to drive through the Bariba River and you're in Venezuela or you're in Guyana, depending on the direction. Yarakita got about 3 police. You just got to walk in. Kaikan probably got about 4 or 5 police. They just got to swim across the river. People are afraid for their safety. You know, the second level of fear, ladies and gentlemen? They are afraid to speak up about the fear that they have. They are afraid that if they speak up, they will become victims of the People's Progressive Party. So they have no right to be afraid. Why does this government not go and meet with the indigenous peoples in the villages? Don't tell me when NTC come next week, you're going to go and give the leaders assurance. At best, you got 1 or 2 persons from every village. You need to get to the ground and speak with the people who live there. This is not signing the LCDS, resolution. They're signing a document saying that they're not fearful because you give them assurance, assuming that you do. It's not going to alleviate the fear of the people who are living in the villages. NTC and government, you need to get it right. Focus on the issues that affect people where they live. Fix the bridges, fix the road, put security in the villages, assure the people. Don't do like the command in Mabaruma, tell people that they're safe even though they ain't seeing police and soldiers. What kind of assurance is that? But the president could sit down and pronounce on how little Adriana Young died. She died by drowning, and there was no forcible drowning or other means of killing. And then the Thursday Rambler says they don't do diplomacy in the public. Go to the villages and tell them that. Don't wait till you're going to campaign and carry a chainsaw and an outboard motor and an ATV and tell people that everything is okay. And you can't assure them by telling them they must shoot and scoot either. Well, let's talk a little bit about Pauline and this UNPFII. That's the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. What did she say? Let's see what she said. She said a lot of things. She said a lot of things. A lot of what she said, where there was truth, had lots of elastic. She talked about the composition of the parliament. At something around 39% of the parliamentarians are indigenous women. How many indigenous women were elected parliamentarians from the PPP? Elected. I'm talking about Sarah Brown, who was co-opted and who been to court and all sorts of stuff about the illegality or legality of her presence there. I'm talking about elected women. How many? Pauline? How many more? And then let's see what she says here. She said, and I'm going to quote this piece just for the humor of it. Chair, our low carbon development strategy is a product of consultation and endorsement by the indigenous people. Pauline, you lie. We are proud to include indigenous peoples as equal partners in addressing climate change and the environment, both at the national and international levels. Absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. The indigenous people of this country were never consulted when you mortgaged their property. When lands, standing forests were mortgaged for money, indigenous peoples were entirely, completely, totally unaware of what you and Jack Dio were doing. What consultation are you talking about? After the thing hit the fan, you all run to the upper Mazruni to say you're consulting. After the fact, when everything was signed, sealed, and finalized. And then you all decided that you were going to give the indigenous peoples 15%. With whom did you consult to determine 15%? With whom? And when? Did you tell the UNPFI that? Did you provide them with that detail? No. And then when you imposed on the villages, contrary to statutory law, finance committees peopled by People's Progressive Party representatives, manage and run parallel to the village council and its finance committee, parallel to the established, elected, in some cases, treasurer of the village council. Did you tell the UNPFII that you violated the Amerindian Act in so doing? When you decided which projects and which programs you were going to fund with the money in the village, did you tell the UNPFII that you disregarded what the village wanted? What the villagers believed that they should have? We could talk about a lot of these projects and who benefited, you know. We could talk about a lot of them. Just like we could talk about Arnaputa and the mining arrangement. Did you tell the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues that a large percentage of the money that was put into the hands of those finance committees that you all established cannot be accounted for? Did you, for example, tell them that in Matakai there's an NDC, a CDC, I beg your pardon, that you all established that bought a motor vehicle and that allegedly it is vested in the name of an official attached to the council and not to the council itself? Did you tell the UNPFII that you bought an all-terrain vehicle for the village of Tasiwini in the Matakai sub-region, and they never got it because somebody else using it for gold mining operations of their own in the private capacity? Did you tell them that? Is that the accountability that you're telling the UNPFII about? Pauline, get a life. Start doing your job. Start speaking the truth. You can start there. Let's see what else. You know, I find it difficult reading the nonsense that they say. Here you are talking about funding entrepreneur opportunities in agriculture, ecotourism, and traditional activities, and you're blocking people from enjoying your tourist resort villages. Absolute nonsense. Talking about expanding access to education. Building a school, putting up a building is not increasing access to education. Pay the teachers. Motivate them to become involved in teaching, in molding our nation. Pay the people. You're talking about expanding investment in ICT connections. And when I go to a village and people see me going next to the ICT hub, somebody running and switching off the facility, I can't use it. Is that how you expand in ICT investment? Is that how you expand in investment in ICT connectivity? When people in the Rupununi tell you that they buy data and the blue thing going wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong on the phone, and by the time the blue thing stop going wrong, the money done, that's the investment you're talking about? When we put those hubs in, they were working. What did you do with them? We're talking about land titling. You know, somebody can be vexed with me. You go there and you're bragging about land titling. You're doing all these massive land titling, and when you get into office, the percentage of land owned by indigenous people was this little bit, and then by the time you get in there, it's this much. Pauline Sukai, I challenge you and your entire Amerindian land titling project unit to make public a schedule of lands titled to indigenous villages, showing what percentage of original titles the PNC, let me left out AP and UAFC for a second. What percentage of original lands were titled, or what percentage of lands were originally titled by the PNC in 1976 and 1991, on the one hand, and what percentage of lands were originally titled by the People's Progressive Party from 1992 to 2015, and you could add in the last 5 years. Item original titles. You see, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. There's something called an absolute grant, which is a form of title. The PNC under Forbes Burnham, Guyana's first prime minister, in 1976, amended the Amerindian Act to include a schedule of villages and districts that became legal owners of their land, titled owners of their land. The documents were distributed later. But that amendment established titles to those villages. The PPP came into government in 1992, saw no importance in indigenous peoples, none at all. For 12 years, 12, they did absolutely nothing. And then when they recognized that under their government, their traditional supporters were migrating and leaving this country, they had to get a substitute vote base to replace that. So they went into Barometer and they took some action there. Let me explain to you what's happening. When these absolute grants were issued, they had what you call sort of landmarkers for boundaries. They were not surveyed. There were no GPS coordinates at the time. It was impossible in the terrain under consideration for measurement and placing of pole markers and so on. So they were generic markers, like the foot of a mountain, the estuary of a creek, or some watershed or the other. Those were boundaries, generic markers that were identified. When the PPP recognized that all of this land was already owned by the people, they did two things. They engineered a project which would see them issuing something called land titles as opposed to absolute grants. Absolute grants are issued under the State Lands Act. And these land titles are issued, they're similar to the ones that they're issuing now for little house lots under the Land Registry Act. Now, in order to get this land title, the land has to be surveyed, the coordinates established and markers placed, and then you get a land title. So it's converting an absolute grant to a land title, right? It's like changing from a fat line exercise book to a fine line exercise book. The same exercise book. In the process, they secured this money. In the process, what they did, the second thing, is started to tell the villagers that the piece of paper called an absolute grant was not good in law. They lied to the people. And so now they have to come and give title. And this piece of paper that they're giving is not replacing that as a valuable piece of paper. It's coming in its stead because that really never existed. They lied to the people. Here's the third thing that they did. They deliberately surveyed a smaller portion of land than was described in the absolute grant and gave title for that smaller parcel of land. And then when the villagers said, but this is not what we think, we had more land, they said, okay, write an application for an extension. And then they will process the application for the extension and they'll issue another absolute grant, which in the first place they claimed was not valid. And then they will process that and convert it to a land title. And then they'll say, we gave this village 2 titles. Never had none before, we gave them 2. One for the big piece and one for the extension. That's manipulation. That's dishonesty. But this is what they have been doing. And they've been saying to people that your absolute grant is not valid. And now they're telling people that land titling was born in 1992 in this country. Pauline Sukai, the Ministry of Marine Affairs, and the People's Progressive Party must stop lying to indigenous peoples. And you see all this bashing about the APA, it is doing you no good. All you seek to do is to destroy the APA as an image, and in the process, just like how the media gave Odessa Primus a lift, that's exactly what you're doing to the APA. Anil Roberts and others from the ministry and from the NTC have been condemning the APA, accusing them of soliciting money to do work for the indigenous community, and they never consulted with them to represent them. Who are the people on the APA membership list? I hold no brief for the APA. And then when you say they never consulted, never got on board, absolute nonsense. When we were in government, the APA was on us like hawks. They were advocating for the indigenous communities, for the indigenous villages, for the indigenous peoples. They had ideas. They had plans that they wanted to pursue. Some of them could work, some of them were misfits. At one time, we had issue with them suggesting to them that, look, this is not a project you can run with. This is a government-led project, but we can work with you on it. So how could you now come and say that they've never consulted? They've never been engaged, they're never involved. You have rejected them. Jagdeo have labeled them. Jagdeo has labeled them as APNU, as PNC. So you don't want anything to do with them. They didn't give us an easy time in government either. But we respect the fact that they represent the indigenous population in this country, and we respect the fact that they have ideas and that they mean well generally, and we engage them. But when every speaker from Guyana's official delegation to the UNPFII comes out with a battle cry against the APA, what are you defending? It is the PPP government that sent East Indian Guyanese to represent African Guyanese at another similar permanent forum of the United Nations. What nonsense is that? Where do you people get off disrespecting Guyanese citizens in the way you do? Indigenous peoples of this country, wake up. Understand that the People's Progressive Party has put a price on your vote. You must recognize that your vote is not a commodity to be traded. They will bring you tractors, they will bring you outboard engines, they will bring you chainsaws, they will bring you ATVs, they'll bring you trucks and minibuses. They're not giving you gifts. As citizens of this country, as owners of lands in this country, as the first peoples of this country, as persons whose rights are enshrined in the Constitution of this country, collectively and separately from others, you are entitled to your share of the state pie. Nobody is treating you specially or giving you gifts. Take the resources that come to your villages, maintain and manage them properly in the best interest of the people of your villages. Convert them, if you can, into economic ventures that will uplift the quality of life of the citizens of your village. And when you come to vote, decide for yourself which political party had your interest at heart. They went to the UNPFI and said, one of them, I don't remember which one of them, that government of Guyana, they support the government of Guyana's amendment to the Amna Act. You had 5 years during which you could have continued a process of consultation in that regard to achieve a product with which the indigenous peoples whose lives are touched and affected by it are comfortable and happy with. The People's Progressive Party dropped the ball. When the AP and UAFC left government, the consultative process for the review of the Amendment Act was advanced. And this same chap who wrote this letter to the Madia Town Council, he has those consultation reports. He has them. Mr. Ali went some time ago into the upper Mazruni and was confronted on the question of the Amendment Act review. He said, money is there, we'll do it. When? If they took 5 years to tell you that they will revise the Amendment Act, a process that you started, you, the indigenous peoples of this country, started, worked on, were hopeful for the conclusion of, and they dropped it only to come 5 years later and tell you they're going to do it. Can you trust them? Would you trust them? Should you trust them? Ladies and gentlemen of Guyana, my dear fellow citizens of this country, your vote is not a commodity for trading purposes. Your vote is sacred. It is the only instrument that you have, the only legitimate instrument that you have that can help to determine what kind of government this country gets, how the lives of your family and all other citizens of this country will be affected. Your vote is sacred. It should not be for sale. Let them bring the money by the bags and give it to you. Use it for the upliftment of your family and your village. Vote your conscience. Vote your soul. And know this, that if Guyana is to grow, the PPP must go. That's all we have time for today on Nation Watch. Thank you very much for joining us and for staying with us the course of the program. Until we meet again, God bless.